Hello, my name is Devin. I'm 27. I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Portland, Oregon. I work from home. I designed app interfaces and websites for a living. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. And honestly, I kind of like the quiet. I moved here about 4 years ago, rented a small 2-bedroom place on a corner lot. Trees, birds, same old mailman every morning. Paranormal. But this story isn't about my job or my house. It's about my neighbor. Her name's Marissa. She lives in right next to mine, literally just a wooden fence between our yards. She's probably around 39, I think. I'm not great at guessing age, but she carries herself like someone who's seen a Loton, talks very little about it. 4 years, we barely spoke. I mean, we nodded at each other when we both happen to pull into our driveways at the same time, or maybe say, hey, if we pass by mailboxes. That was it. She was always polite, just distant. The kind of neighbor you never have a problem with, but also never get to know. I didn't mind. I was focused on my own life work. The occasional date that never realized anywhere in my podcast. My Dumbledore plants. And I figured she'd just like her space. A lot of people do. Anyway, this all started about 2 months ago. It was a Thursday evening. One after those early spring nights where it's just warm enough to sit outside without breathing. I had just finished watering plants on my deck. Yeah, I know plants. And was about to head inside when I saw her. Marissa was sitting in a chair in her backyard near the fence. Alone. No book, no phone, no headphones, not even a drink. At first, just sitting there staring ahead at nothing. She looked almost frozen. I watched her for a second, not wanting to be weird or anything, but something felt off. I'd never seen her like that before. Usually, she had earbuds in where she was reading. She seemed like the kind of person who kept her thoughts tightly wound up. But this was different. Then I noticed the bottle. Red wine, looked like it was already half gone. She poured herself another glass slowly, like she was thinking about something heavy. The kind of movement you make when your body is there, but your mind's somewhere else. I don't know what made him do it. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe I just hated how lonely I stepped to the edge of my deck and called out gently, "You all right over there?" She turned her head slowly toward me. No emotion, not angry, not sighed, just tired. Her eyes looked distant like she hadn't slept properly in days. We held eye contact for maybe 3 seconds. Then she nodded once, barely stood up without saying a word, and went back inside, leaving the bottle and the half full glass on the table behind her. I stood there for a few moments, staring at the fence between us. I'd seen her walk that same path 100 times before, from the chair to the sliding glass door. But this time, it hit different. Like I'd just peeked into a life I'd completely misunderstood. I went inside, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something in the way she moved, the silence, the windy way she looked at me. It stuck in my head. I wasn't trying to make anything of it. It wasn't romantic or anything like that, just human. There was nothing sad about it, something The next day I thought about going over to check on her, just knock and say, "Hey, hope you're doing okay." But I didn't. I convinced myself it'd be word. She didn't owe me anything. I was just the guy next door. Saturday came. I saw her take out her trash and walk back in without glancing at my place. Sunday, same. Headphones in, hoodie on. That's some distant expression. But that Thursday night, that image of her sitting alone with the wine and the blank stare, I couldn't shake it. And maybe that was the first moment I realized I'd lived next to her for 4 years and I didn't know a damn thing about her. Not really, not yet. It was exactly 5 nights after that evening in her backyard. I remember the time back as I just paused the show. I was watching some forgettable detective stories and glanced at the clock before jetting up to grab a snack. It said 10:42 p.m. I hadn't even made it to Thekachan when I heard the knock. 3 knocks, not urgent, not aggressive, but also not casual. I hesitated. Nobody ever knocked on my door that late, and he wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, it took me a full second to process whoa. It was Marissa standing there in a gray hoodie, drenched from the rain. Her hair was wet and stuck to her face. No make. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. More like from exhaustion. She didn't say hello, didn't even try to osmol. She just looked at me and said calmly, "Sorry to bother you." I didn't know who else to come to. That sentence alone threw me off. We barely knew each other. We weren't friends. She could have called anyone, a friend, a rideshare, hell, even a cab. But she was standing there on my doorstep in the rain at night. Then she added, "My dad's in the hospital. He had a stroke." I blinked, unsure what to say. "Do ya want to come?" And she nodded, slight line, stepped inside without another word. She stood there just inside the door, dripping onto the mat, holding her phone in one hand like it was a lifeline. She wasn't shaking, but her body was tense, like every muscle was holding itself together through force of habit. I offered her a towel and she took it quietly, dried her face, pushed her hair back. She said she'd just gotten a call from the hospital. 20 minutes earlier, her father had collapsed at his home, and a neighbor had found him and called 911. He was alive but unconscious. The hospital was 30 minutes away, and she didn't want to go alone. I know it's late. I couldn't get in my car. Just walked here. I told her I'd drive her, no hesitation. I grabbed my Kisan jacket and we left. The rain hadn't let up. It was a steady, heavy drizzle that made the streets look like glass. The windshield wipers created a slow rhythm that filled the silence between us. She didn't talk much during the drive, just stared out the window. Every so often, she'd check her phone, but no new messages came in. After a while, I put on some music, soft instrumental stuff, just background noise. She looked at the screen on my dash and said, "That's from Arrival." I nodded. "Yaknuit. It's one of my favorite films." That was the first time I'd ever talk about something personal. I told her it was one of mine, too. Wedded briefly about how the score Medethi movie so much more emotional. How silence in it said more than the dialogue. She said something like, "Samatima silence is the only thing that honest." We got to the hospital just before midnight. She asked me to wait in the car just in case she needed to come back out quickly. I said I'd be right there. She walked inside with her hoodie still damp, holding her phone tight in one hand. I watched her disappear behind sliding glass doors, her shoulders lightly hunched, like she was bracing for something worse than she old knew. I sat there for maybe 30 minutes, didn't touch my phone, just stared at the wet parking lot. The lights above casting reflections on the ground. I didn't know why, but I felt like I had to be there. Not for any reward, not Tobe the hero, just to be there. She came back out with her hands in her pockets. Didn't say anything for a second, just get into the car and stared ahead. Then finally, "He's stable. They don't know if he'll wake up, but he's stable." Her voice cracked slightly at the word wake. She took a breath. I didn't think I'd cry, but I did. That's all she said before going quiet again. I didn't ask for details. I just started the car and drove her home. When we got back, I walked her to her door. She turned to me and said, "Thank you for driving." Fournette asking a bunch of questions. I shrugged and said, "Sometimes that's the best kind of help." She looked at me for a long moment. Not a smile, exactly. Boot something close. Then she opened her and went inside. I stood on her perch for a few more seconds before heading home. Back inside, I sat on my couch and tried to go back to my show. But I couldn't stop thinking about how she looked when she said I didn't know how else to come to after, for years, off living next to each other. Hundreds of quick greetings, dozens of drink wainads. That was the first real moment we'd ever shared. And I had a strange feeling, the kind that lives low in your chest and doesn't go away. That something between us had just shifted. It had been a few days since that night, since the drive, since the hospital. Marissa didn't leave the house. After that, I'd see the light in her kitchen late at night. But during that day, nothing. No walks, no trash cans rolled out, no porch light. She'd vanished into her space. And part of me wondered if maybe I'd overstepped by helping her. Maybe she regretted coming. I kept telling myself not to overthink it. We weren't friends. She didn't owe me anything. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little curious, and maybe something more than curious. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was hauling a bag of garbage out to the bin when I heard her door creak open. I turned. She was standing in her doorway, sweatpants, oversized tee, hair pulled back, no makeup, still looked tired, but clearer than before. She raised a hand in aquiote wave and said, "Hey, do you want to come in for coffee?" I didn't hesitate. Sure, it was the first time I'd ever been inside her house. It was warm, not just temperature-wise. The lights were soft, natural. A few candles were lit in the kitchen, even though it was broad daylight. Smelled like a cinnamon or cloves. The walls were lined with books, hardcovers, paperbacks, some clearly well-read with cracked spines. In the corner of her living room sat a vintage record player with a small stack of vinyls. Bowie, Joni Mitchell, Suff, John Stevens. I remember thinking, none of this fits the quiet woman I thought I knew. We sat at the small kitchen table. She poured us hot coffee. No cream, no sugar, just strong and black. We sipped in silence for a. He called me weak for not holding it together. She laughed, once bitterly. Had told me I was embarrassing the family. Then she got up and walked into the living room, pulled an old photo off the shelf. She handed it to me. Her father, stiff posture, military uniform, Nazmal, he was a good soldier, not a good father. She sat back down. When I told him I didn't want kids, not after losing me husband, he said I was selfish, that he'd regret it, that no man would want African woman who didn't want a family. They looked at the photo, then at her head-ons like a complete ass. It came out being, I could stop it. She looked surprised, then laughed. A real laugh. Yeah, he was. She leaned back in her chair, folded her arms across her chest. I didn't mean to dump this all on you. She paused. You didn't run when he showed up at your door the other night. Most people would have. I shook my head. It didn't feel like something to run from. There was a long pause. She looked out the window. Her backyard was still wet from rain. Earlier that morning, a furibin's picking at the grass. I used to think silence was strength, she said. That keeping things, it made me, but lately, I'm starting to think, it just makes me lonelier. That line stuck with me. We didn't talk much after that, just sat there. The kind of quiet that isn't awkward, just present. Before I left, I helped her carry a box of books down to the basement. Jet thanked me, said she hadn't touched that box since the funeral. At the door, Internet asked, "You okay?" She looked him in the eye. Today, I think I might be that night. Back at my place, I didn't put on a show, didn't scroll my phone. I just sat there thinking of her voice when she said that, about how many times I'd seen her past, her naughty at her, and never once asked who Shirley was. I lived next to Marissa for 4 years, and in one afternoon, he learned more about her than I had in Altos years combined. It wasn't some grand turning point. We didn't hug, we didn't flirt, we didn't suddenly become best friends, but something opened, a door between us that hadn't been there before, and I knew, if she ever invited back, I'd go without thinking twice. It was strange how fast something ordinary could start to feel different. A week after that conversation, in her kitchen, I got a text from an unknown number while I was finishing a client call. It was short. I made tea. If you were not busy. Backyard's open. Emmy. No emojis, no punctuation flair, just her style, direct, minimal, no fluff. He grabbed a jacket and walked over without thanking twice. Her backyard was nothing fancy. A weathered wooden table, a couple of mismatched chairs, and some garden beds. That looked like they hadn't seen much love in a while, but the air smelled like fresh herbs. She had a candle burning in the center of the table, one of those thick ones that probably came from a local shop, not as. She was already sitting there when I stepped through the gate. "Hey," she said. Her voice was softer than usual. I nodded, sat down across from her. She poured tea from a glass kettle. It was chamomile, no sugar, no lemon, just warm and clean. We didn't jump into any deep conversations right away. That wasn't her style, and I never tried to force it. We talked about the weather, her basil plant that refused to grow this year, my failed attempt at assembling a standing desk. But somewhere in the quiet moments between sips, something changed. She started opening up slowly but freely, like she didn't have to protect herself in this space, like the fence between our house didn't matter anymore. She told me a booth garden. He planted all this, she said, waving her hand at the beds behind us. We used to sit right here every Saturday. He drank bad coffee. I'd drink tea, and we'd argue about music. She smelled, but it was heavy, like a memory held close and carefully. He was a terrible gardener, she added, laughing, but he loved trying. This rosemary bush, he accidentally sat on it once and killed the whole thing. I still tease him about it when I come out here. She went quiet after that. I didn't say anything, I just listened. She didn't heed comfort, just space. And she said something that made me sit up a bit. Yuck, no, I thought I'd be one of those women who gets remarried quickly, like ones in books. They cry, they heal, and then they fall in love again. But it just stopped. She looked at her tea for a second before continuing. People say time heals, but they don't tell you that it also makes you forget what closeness feels like. After a while, you start to feel like maybe you're not supposed to have it again. I wanted to say anything that felt honest, but all I could come up with was think closeness just changes form, doesn't disappear, just hides. She looked at me then really looked. You're not like most people I know. That's probably a good thing, I said, smiling. She laughed again. That same unfiltered laugh from last time. It caught me off guard. Not because it was slewed or strange, but because it felt to love. There was a silence after that. But it was the kind you settle into, enough kind. You want to break? She got opened, came back with 2 glasses of red wine. Don't get excited, she said. It's from a gas station. Perfect. I replayed we clinketed glasses. Wet hocked more that night than we had in all the previous weeks combined. Nothing dramatic, just real. I told her about me last relationship, how it fell apart. Not with a fight, but with silence. I spent months pretending everything was fine just to avoid the moment when it wouldn't be. She told me about her move to Oregon, about how she almost sold the house after her husband passed, but decided to stay because she wasn't ready to let go of the memories. Just yet, everyone tells you to move on, she said, but no one tells you where exactly you're supposed to go. As the sky darkened, we moved to heavier things without meaning to. She asked me if Eva felt lonely working from home. I asked her if she ever felt invisible in her own neighborhood. She said, yes, so did I at one point. I noticed she had shifted her chair just a bit closer to me. Not dramatically, just enough to close the distance between neighbors and people who see each other. And then Kamithi moment I'll probably never forget. She looked at me, sat down her glass, and said, "You know what's funny? You lived over there for 4 years, and he thought you were just a guy with headphones." I raised an eyebrow, "And you were the lady with all the Amazon boxes and the cat that never showed up." Shesmilled, "I don't even have a cat." Exactly, we both laughed. Then she said quietly, "I like this talking." I forgot what that felt like. I nodded. Me too. We didn't touch. We didn't flirt. There was no dramatic music playing. Just two people sitting at a witten table, under string lights, sharingsalence, and stories like they mean something again. I left that night when the candle had burned halfway down. She walked me to the gate, and we just looked at each other for a second before saying goodnight. No promises, no see you tomorrow, just enough. Back in my own house, I realized how weird it was. I'd spent years trying to date the right person, trying to impress women, who barely remembered my name. And here I was now thinking about a quiet, grieving woman next door who poured gas station wine and laughed like she hadn't in years, and it felt more real than anything I'd had in a long time. It was a Saturday morning. Early, the sky was overcast and the street was still. No kids on bikes, no joggers, not even the sound of lawnmowers. Just that quiet kind of stillness that makes you feel like the day hasn't started yet. I was sitting at my desk, finishing up a design draft for a client. Coffee half warm beside me. Inbox, open music, playing low. Then I heard it. 3 soft knocks at the front door. I looked at the time, 7:13 a.m. I knew it was her before even opened the door. Marissa stood there, still in the clothes from the night before. Jeans, a sweater, her hair, and a loose braid. But something was different. Her face was pale, almost expressionless, and in her hands she held a brown envelope. She didn't wait for me to say anything. "My dad passed away this morning," she said. She didn't flinch, just said it like a fact that hadn't sunk in yet. I opened the door wider. "Come in." She stepped inside and sat on the edge of me couch, still holding the envelope. It was around 4:30 a.m., she said. "They called, said he was stable last night. Said I didn't need to come in. Then they called again 2 hours later." I sat down across from her, waited. He didn't wake up. She said, "I never really got to sign anything. Not properly, but I went there last week. Sat with him for an hour. Told him I forgave him. Told him I didn't hate him." She held the envelope out to me. I hesitated. "What is it?" I asked. "His thing," she said. "Documents ID, a photo of my mom, and a letter addressed to me. I haven't opened it yet." She pulled it back to her lap. "I'm not ready." I nodded. Didn't press. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that had weight, not tension. Then she said, "I don't know why I came here. I didn't want to be alone, but I didn't want to be with anyone else either." He got up, poured us both fresh coffee, came back, and handed her a cup. She took it, wrapped her hands around it like she was trying to warm something inside her. "Do you want me to drive you to the hospital later?" I asked. She shook her head. "Already cited Evrian. They're keeping him in cold storage until Monday. I'll make arrangements then." She looked exhausted but clear, like her brain was already 5 steps ahead in the process of what had to be done next. But then she surprised him. "I need to get away from here for a while," she said. "Just a few days." I was thinking of going up to the coast, Cannon Beach, or maybe Manzanita. I nodded again. "That sounds like a good idea." She took a sip of coffee. "Would you come with me?" I looked at her, searched her face for a hint of anything unclear. Butch was steady. "You don't have to. I'm not asking for anything dramatic."